I woke up in a cold sweat, heart racing as the echoes of my grandfather's voice faded away. "Emily! Emily!" he had called out, his voice both urgent and comforting, like a lighthouse guiding me through the fog of despair. I had dreamt of him standing in a vast field of flowers, his smile bright and warm. But then the scene warped into chaos. Screams, darkness, and the sensation of being trapped. I sat up in bed, the remnants of the dream clinging to my mind like cobwebs, and tried to shake it off. I glanced at the clock on my bedside table. It read 6:30 a.m. The morning light filtered through my curtains, illuminating the room, but it did little to ease the dread curling in my stomach. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that it was just a dream, but deep down, I felt a gnawing sense of urgency that I couldn't ignore. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up, my feet cold against the hardwood floor. The house was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos in my dream. My mother, Sarah, was still in her room, lost in her own world of grief since my grandfather's passing. I tiptoed down the hallway, the walls adorned with family photos that felt like silent witnesses to our pain. When I reached the kitchen, the smell of burnt toast hit me. My mother stood at the stove, her back to me. She was wearing yesterday's clothes, her hair a messy bun atop her head. I hesitated, unsure if I should interrupt her solitude, but the urge to talk about my dream was overwhelming. I needed someone to listen. "Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned slightly, her face drawn and tired. "What is it, Emily?" "I had a dream about Grandpa again," I said, forcing the words out. "He was—" "Not now, please," she interrupted, her eyes darting back to the pan. "I'm trying to get breakfast ready." "But it's important," I insisted, feeling the frustration bubbling within me. He was calling my name, and then there was so much noise. It felt real. "Emily, I can't—" Her voice trailed off, and I could see the flicker of pain in her eyes. "I just can't deal with this right now. I'm sorry." I felt a lump form in my throat as I watched her turn back to the stove, her shoulders slumped. Frustration turned to hurt, and I stepped back, retreating to the living room with a heavy heart. It was like trying to reach a locked door with no key. I felt so helpless. School was a blur. I sat in class, the teacher's voice fading into the background as I replayed the dream in my mind. I tried to focus, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Grandpa and the chaos that had overtaken his image. What did it mean? Why was he calling for me? At lunch, I found Jake sitting at our usual table, his plate piled high with fries. He looked up as I approached, his usual grin fading slightly when he saw the expression on my face. "Hey, Em, you okay?" he asked, concern etching his brow. I sighed and plopped down across from him, pushing my food around on the tray. "Not really. I had another dream about my grandpa last night. It was intense." Jake raised an eyebrow, skepticism creeping into his features. "Intense how?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. He was in a field, and then everything just fell apart. There were screams, and I felt like I was losing him all over again. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Look, I get that grieving is hard, but dreams are just that, dreams. They don't mean anything." "It felt real, Jake," I shot back, my voice rising. "He was calling for me. What if it's a sign?" "A sign?" He scoffed. You can't go looking for meaning in every dream you have. It's probably just your brain processing everything." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, frustration bubbling over. "You don't understand. You didn't know him like I did. He was always there for me." Jake softened a bit, his expression shifting to one of concern. "I know, and I'm really sorry for what you're going through, but you also need to take care of yourself. You can't let dreams run your life." I nodded, but his words felt hollow. How could he understand when I felt so deeply connected to the dreams? I just wanted someone to believe me, to feel what I felt. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, and I pushed my tray away, my appetite completely gone. Later, as I walked home alone, the weight of my thoughts pressed down on me. The greens of the trees and the blue of the sky felt muted, as if the world itself was clouded by my grief. I needed answers, but where could I find them? I felt a pull towards the past, to the stories my grandfather used to tell me, but I didn't know where to start. Upon arriving home, I found the house quiet again. I dropped my backpack by the door and made my way to my grandfather's old study, a room I hadn't entered since the funeral. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a space frozen in time. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that streamed through the window, illuminating the clutter of books and papers. I stepped inside, my heart racing with both fear and excitement. My grandfather had always been a storyteller, weaving tales of our family history that felt more like legends than reality. I needed to find out if there was something more to my dreams, something hidden within the stories he told. As I scanned the room, I noticed a large, leather-bound book sitting on his desk. I approached it, my fingers brushing over the worn cover. It felt familiar, like the embrace of an old friend. I opened it carefully, revealing pages filled with elegant handwriting and faded photographs of family members I barely recognized. Flipping through the pages, I stumbled upon a section that caught my eye. There, scribbled in the margins, were notes about a curse that had plagued our family for generations. My heart raced as I read about a metal that had belonged to my grandfather, said to be the key to breaking the cycle of tragedy that had befallen us. Could this be what I'm dreaming about? I whispered to myself, the words tumbling out in disbelief. I closed the book, a sudden determination igniting within me. I needed to find that metal to uncover the truth behind the curse. As I left the study, I made my way to the attic, where my grandfather stored old belongings he couldn't bear to part with. I climbed the stairs, the wood creaking beneath my weight, and pushed open the door to the attic. Dust swirled around me as I stepped inside, and I was hit with the smell of old wood and forgotten memories. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, some labeled, others not. I began to rummage through them, my heart racing as I searched for anything that might lead me to the metal. I opened one box marked photos and began flipping through the faded images of family gatherings, my grandfather standing proudly beside my grandmother. Just as I was about to give up, my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. I pulled it out to reveal a small, intricate metal, glinting in the dim light of the attic. My breath caught in my throat. This had to be it. The metal my grandfather mentioned. I held it up, examining the delicate engravings etched into its surface. "What do you hold?" I whispered, feeling an inexplicable connection to the object. It felt heavy in my palm, both a burden and a promise. As I continued to sift through the box, I discovered a collection of letters and notes, yellowed with age. I carefully unfolded one, revealing my grandfather's neat handwriting. The letter spoke of love, loss, and a warning. A cycle of tragedies that could only be broken with a choice. "Is this what you wanted me to find, Grandpa?" I murmured, feeling a chill run down my spine. I needed to know more. With the metal clutched tightly in my hand, I made my way back down the attic stairs, my mind racing with possibilities. The dreams, the chaos, the calling. Everything felt intertwined in a way I struggled to understand. I had to find a way to break this cycle. But how? As I descended into the living room, I found my mother sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television, the flickering images reflecting the emptiness in her eyes. I hesitated, unsure if I should share my discovery. But the urgency of my dreams weighed heavily on me. "Mom," I said softly, and she turned to look at me, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "What is it, Emily?" she asked, her voice flat. "I found something in Grandpa's attic," I began, holding up the metal. "It belonged to him, and I think it's connected to the dreams I've been having." Her expression hardened, and I could see the walls she had built around her heart. "I don't want to hear about this, Emily. You need to let it go." "But I can't," I insisted, desperation creeping into my voice. "I think there's a way to understand what he was trying to warn us about." "Emily," she said, her tone sharp, the musty smell of old books filled the air as I stepped into the library, a place that had always felt like a sanctuary for me. Rows of bookshelves towered above, each one holding stories waiting to be discovered. Today, however, I was not searching for a simple novel. I was on a quest for answers about my family's past. The dreams of my grandfather had been haunting me, vivid and chaotic, and I felt an urgent need to understand their meaning. I wandered through the aisles, running my fingers along the spines of the books until I spotted a worn leather-bound volume tucked away on a high shelf. I climbed on a nearby stool to retrieve it, dust flying into the air as I opened the book. The title, The Cursed Lineage, sent a shiver down my spine. I felt an unexplainable pull towards it as I flipped through the yellowed pages filled with handwritten notes and illustrations. Maybe this is what I've been looking for, I muttered to myself, scanning the pages for anything that might connect to the dreams. My heart raced as I read about a family curse that had plagued generations. The words leapt off the page, speaking of tragedies that befell those who bore the family name. It mentioned a specific object, a medallion that had belonged to my grandfather. My throat tightened as I read the words, "The medallion holds the key to breaking the curse." "Emily?" A voice called out, breaking my concentration. I turned to see Jake, my best friend, leaning against a nearby shelf with his arms crossed. "What are you doing here all alone? I thought you were still dealing with your, dreams and stuff." "I am," I replied, my voice low as I closed the book. "I think I found something important." Jake raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "You mean like your dreams are connected to a curse? Come on, Em. That sounds like something out of a bad horror movie." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. "It's not just a random thought, Jake. I've been having these visions, and they feel real. I found this book, and it talks about a medallion that could be tied to my grandfather. I need to find it." "Okay, but have you considered that maybe your mind is just processing everything? Your grandfather's death, your family drama." "Jake, stop. This isn't just in my head," I snapped, my emotions flaring up. "I need to figure this out. I can't just ignore it." He held his hands up in defeat, his expression softening. All right, I'm here for you. What's the plan?" I took a deep breath, my determination returning. "I need to go back to my grandfather's house. I have to search the attic. If the medallion is there, it might give me the answers I need." Jake nodded, his concern evident. "Are you sure that's a good idea? You know how your mom is right now." "I have to try," I said, my heart racing at the thought of the attic. "I can't let this haunt me anymore." Our conversation lingered in my mind as I made my way home, the shadows of doubt creeping in. What if Jake was right? What if I was just imagining all of this? But deep down, I knew I had to find the truth. As soon as I got home, I headed straight to my grandfather's old house, a place that felt both comforting and eerie after his passing. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside, the familiar scent of aged wood and dust enveloping me. The house was quiet, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I made my way to the attic, the wooden stairs creaking under my weight. My heart raced as I reached the top, the dim light filtering through a small window casting shadows across the room. Boxes were scattered everywhere, filled with memories and forgotten treasures. I began to rummage through them, my fingers shaking with anticipation. As I pulled out a stack of old photo albums, I noticed something shiny peeking out from behind a box. My breath caught in my throat as I leaned closer. A medallion. It was beautiful, with intricate designs etched into the surface. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my palm, and suddenly a rush of memories flooded my mind. It was as if I could hear my grandfather's voice echoing in my ears, warning me about the legacy I was about to uncover. "Emily, are you okay?" Jake's voice broke through my reverie, and I turned to see him standing naively at the attic door. "I found it," I exclaimed, holding up the medallion. "It's the medallion from the book." Jake stepped closer, his skepticism replaced by curiosity. "Wow, it's stunning. But what does it mean?" "I don't know yet," I replied, my heart racing with excitement and trepidation. "But I feel like it's connected to everything. The dreams, the curse." I set the medallion down on a nearby table and continued sifting through the boxes, My fingers brushed against an old diary, its leather cover cracked and worn. Flipping it open, I started reading entries that detailed my grandfather's life, his struggles, and the family's history. Then I found it, a faded photograph of the medallion just like the one I had discovered. Below the picture, my grandfather had written, "The key to breaking our curse lies within the choices we make." "What does that mean?" Jake asked, peering over my shoulder. I think it means that this medallion isn't just a trinket. It's a part of something bigger. There's a cycle of tragedies that we need to break, and I might be the one to do it, I replied, my heart pounding with fear and determination. Jake frowned, concern etched on his face. "But how? What exactly do you have to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted, feeling the weight of uncertainty settle on my shoulders. "But I have to figure it out. I can't let this continue to haunt my family." As I placed the diary back, a twinge of fear crept in. What if I was stepping into something I didn't fully understand? The dreams, the medallion, the curse. It felt overwhelming, but I couldn't turn back now. "I need to get home," I finally said, pulling myself away from the memories. "I have to think about all this." "Let me walk you back," Jake offered, his voice steady. "You shouldn't be alone right now." As we walked through the quiet streets, my mind raced with possibilities. The medallion felt like a key, but to what? I could still hear my grandfather's voice in my head, urging me to uncover the truth. "Emily, whatever happens, I'm here for you," Jake said as we reached my house. I nodded, grateful for his support, but the unease lingered deep within me. What lay ahead was uncertain, and the weight of my family's past felt heavier than ever. I climbed into bed that night, the medallion resting on my nightstand, its presence both comforting and ominous. My dreams would continue, I was sure of that, but now I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could uncover the truth and change the fate of my family. The cycle of tragedy had to end, and I was determined to find a way. As the sunlight streamed through the cracks in my curtains, I awoke in a cold sweat, my heart racing. The remnants of the dream still clung to me like a heavy fog. I could hear my grandfather's voice calling my name, echoing in the recesses of my mind. It felt so real, so vivid. I could see him, standing in a vast field of flowers, his warm smile bright against the colorful blooms. But then, as dreams often do, it twisted into something darker. The flowers wilted, and the scene transformed into chaos. Screams, flashes of red, and a sense of urgency that gripped my chest. I sat up in bed, feeling the remnants of panic coursing through me. My throat was dry, and I could still hear the echoes of those screams. I needed to tell someone to make sense of it, but who would understand? My mother, Sarah, was still deep in her own grief, lost in her own world ever since my grandfather's passing. I stumbled out of bed and made my way to the kitchen, hoping the warmth of the morning sun would chase away the shadows of the night. "Mom!" I called, my voice tentative as I stepped into the kitchen. She was there, sitting at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, staring blankly out the window. "Can we talk?" She didn't turn to me. "Not now, Emily. I'm just thinking," she replied, her tone distant. I felt a pang of frustration. It was like trying to talk to a wall. I shifted my weight, searching for the right words. "Mom, I had another dream about Grandpa. He was..." "Emily," she interrupted, finally looking at me. Her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and annoyance. "I can't do this right now. I need to process what happened." I bit my lip, trying to hold back the surge of anger and hurt. "But it's important. I think it's connected to something. I just need you to listen." She sighed deeply, the kind of sigh that felt heavy with all the unspoken words between us. "I'm sorry, sweetie. I just can't." With that, she turned back to the window, and I felt myself deflate. I wanted to scream, to shake her out of her stupor, but I knew that wouldn't help. Instead, I left the kitchen, feeling more isolated than ever. After a day filled with whispers and glances at school, I met Jake at our usual cafe. The warm smell of coffee and baked goods enveloped me as I slid into the booth opposite him. He looked up, his eyebrows raised in curiosity. "What's up, Em? You look like you've seen a ghost." I chuckled weakly, but it didn't reach my eyes. "It's just, I had another dream about my grandfather. Felt so real. And then there was, your mind processing the loss," he interjected, his tone skeptical. "You've been through a lot, Em. It's normal to have dreams like that." "Normal?" I scoffed, feeling the anger bubble up again. "It's not normal to dream about flowers turning into chaos. Jake, he was warning me about something. I just know it. Or maybe it's just your brain trying to make sense of everything," he replied, leaning back in his seat. "You know how dreams work. They're not always literal." I stared at him, frustration boiling over. "You don't get it. He was trying to tell me something important. Felt like a message." Okay," he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I'm just saying, don't jump to conclusions. Maybe it's just grief playing tricks on you." I sighed, knowing he meant well, but it only added to my growing sense of frustration. I need to figure this out. I have to know if there's something more. The next day, I found myself in the library, surrounded by dusty old books and the smell of paper that felt oddly comforting. I needed answers, and I was determined to find them. I sifted through the shelves, looking for anything that could give me a clue about my family's past. Hours passed, and just when I was about to give up, I stumbled upon a leather-bound book with an ornate cover. As I flipped through the pages, my heart began to race. The text spoke of an ancient family curse that had haunted us for generations. It mentioned a medal, a pendant that had belonged to my grandfather. It was said to hold a power that could either protect or destroy, depending on how it was used. My mind raced with the implications. Could this be what my dreams were trying to tell me? I turned the pages frantically, my fingers trembling with excitement. There, tucked between two pages, was a photograph of the medal. It was beautiful, intricately designed, shimmering with a light that seemed to pulse even in the stillness of the library. But as I gazed at the image, a sinking feeling hit me. I remembered the last time I was at my grandfather's house. The medal was missing. I felt an uneasy knot form in my stomach. What if the absence of the medal was connected to my dreams? Determined, I decided to search the old attic in my grandfather's house. It was dusty and cluttered, filled with memories of a time long past. I climbed the creaky stairs, each step echoing in the silence. When I finally reached the attic, I was met with a jumble of boxes and forgotten treasures. I began to rummage through the boxes, my heart racing. My hands brushed against old toys, clothes, and stacks of yellowed papers. And then, there it was, a small, ornate box tucked away in a corner. I opened it with trembling fingers, revealing a collection of letters and photographs. Among them was a letter from my grandfather. I unfolded it carefully, my breath catching as I read the familiar handwriting. The letter spoke of a cycle of tragedies that had plagued our family and a choice that needed to be made to break it. My heart raced as I realized this might be the answer I was looking for. Could it be that the events from my dreams were somehow tied to this curse? "Emily, what did you find?" Jake's voice startled me, and I turned to see him standing naively in the doorway, curiosity etched on his face. "I think I found something important," I replied, holding the letter close to my chest. "It's about a curse that our family has been dealing with for generations." "A curse?" he echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Like a fairy tale?" "Not a fairy tale. It's real, Jake. Look at this." I gestured for him to join me as I spread the letters out on the floor, each one telling pieces of our family history. As he read through the notes, I could see the skepticism fade from his expression. "This is intense. So, you think that medal has something to do with it?" "I have to believe it does," I said, my voice trembling with urgency. "If it holds any power, then maybe it can help me understand these dreams." Jake furrowed his brow, contemplating. "What if it's like a talisman? Something that connects you to the past?" "I don't know," I murmured, the weight of the words settling over me. "But I have to find it. If it can help break this cycle, I have to try." As the sun began to set outside, casting a warm glow through the attic window. I felt a sense of determination wash over me. I couldn't let fear hold me back any longer. If there was a chance to protect my family and understand what was happening, I had to take it, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. I carefully placed the letter back into the box, knowing that it was just the beginning of my journey. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt the weight of the metal's promise resting on my chest. I had to know what it meant, what it could do. But as I drifted into sleep, I was unaware of the visions waiting to unfold, waiting to test my resolve and lead me deeper into the heart of my family's legacy and the shadows that loomed over us. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing as the echoes of my grandfather's voice faded into reality. "Emily," he had called, his voice clear and urgent, but the dream swiftly morphed into chaos. Screams and shadows engulfed the tranquil field of flowers. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a dream. It felt like a warning. But of what? I rubbed my eyes, pushing back the remnants of sleep, and glanced at my phone. It was still early, the sun barely peeking through the curtains. I knew I had to tell my mom, Sarah, about the dream. Maybe she would understand. But as I tiptoed into the kitchen, I found her sitting at the table, her gaze lost in the distance, a cold cup of coffee in front of her. "Mom," I called gently, hoping to break her reverie. She didn't respond, her mind seemingly far away, tethered to the painful memories of my grandfather's recent passing. I took a deep breath and tried again. "I had a dream about Grandpa last night. He was in a field, but then everything turned chaotic. I think it means something." She finally looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and irritation. "Emily, not now. I can't deal with this right now." Her voice was sharp, and I felt my heart sink. "Mom, please, I think it's important." I pressed, frustration bubbling inside me. I had hoped she would be receptive, that she would share in my concern, but I was met with silence again. She turned away, retreating back into her own grief. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The isolation was suffocating. The day dragged on. School felt like a blur of faces and voices, but inside, I was a whirlwind of emotions, thoughts spiraling around my grandfather and those vivid dreams. I desperately needed to talk to someone who would listen, so I met up with Jake after class at our usual cafe. He was my best friend, though sometimes he could be a bit skeptical about the things that mattered to me. "Hey, you look like you've seen a ghost," he greeted as I slid into the booth across from him. "I might as well have," I sighed, running my fingers through my hair. I had another dream about my grandfather. It was intense. "I think he's trying to tell me something." Jake raised an eyebrow, his expression a mix of concern and skepticism. "Or maybe it's just your mind processing everything. You know how grief can mess with your head." I shook my head vehemently. "No, Jake," felt real. There was something in the dream that I can't explain. It was like a warning. "Emily, I get it. You're going through a lot right now. But dreams can be weird. They don't always mean something." He leaned back, crossing his arms, his tone softer now, as if he was trying to comfort me. "Maybe," I conceded, but deep down, I knew there was more to it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something I needed to prepare for. After our conversation, I felt a bit lighter, but the unease still lingered. I spent the next few days buried in books at the library, trying to distract myself from the dreams that continued to haunt me. I stumbled upon a dusty old tome about my family's history and was drawn to a particular passage that spoke of an ancient curse, one that had plagued generations. It mentioned a metal that had belonged to my grandfather, a relic tied to our lineage. My heart raced as I read on. Could this be connected to my dreams? The idea that there was a curse lurking in my family's past sent shivers down my spine. I needed to find that metal. Days later, I found myself rummaging through my grandfather's old belongings in the attic. The air was thick with dust and memories. As I searched, I uncovered a photo of the metal in an old diary, its intricate design captivating me. But it wasn't there. My heart sank as I realized it had gone missing. Where could it be? I muttered to myself, tracing my fingers over the letters in the diary. I felt a sense of urgency. I had to find it, Maybe it held the key to understanding the dreams and the chaos that seemed to be closing in around me. Determined, I dug deeper into the attic, moving boxes and old furniture. And then I found it. A small wooden box tucked into a corner, covered in cobwebs. With trembling hands, I opened it, revealing a collection of letters and notes. My breath caught as I pulled out a letter from my grandfather, his familiar handwriting sending a wave of nostalgia through me. As I read, my heart raced. He spoke of a cycle of tragedies and of a choice that had to be made. My mind raced with possibilities. Could this be what I had seen in my dreams? Emily, what are you doing up here? Jake's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I looked up to see him standing at the top of the stairs, his brow furrowed with concern. I found something. You need to see this. He came closer, peering into the box. What's all this? I handed him the letter, and as he read, I watched the realization dawn on his face. This is intense. You think the metal is connected to this? I have to find it, Jake. I think it's the only way to break whatever this is, I said, my voice trembling with determination and fear. Jake looked at me, uncertainty clouding his eyes. You really believe that, don't you? Yes, I replied firmly. I have to believe it. I can't just sit back and wait for whatever is coming. That night, I put the metal around my neck, feeling its cold weight against my skin. As I drifted off to sleep, I could only hope that it would help me make sense of the dreams that had begun to feel like reality. But when I closed my eyes, the visions returned, more vivid and terrifying than before. This time it was Ethan, my younger brother, and he was in danger. I could see him, laughing with his friends, but then the laughter turned to screams, and my heart dropped into my stomach. When I woke up, panic filled me. I had to warn him. I threw on some clothes and rushed out of the house, my pulse racing as I made my way to the park where I knew Ethan would be playing basketball with his friends. Ethan, I called, spotting him under the fading sunlight. He turned, a playful grin on his face, but it quickly faded when he saw the urgency in my eyes. What's up, Em? He asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. Listen, you need to come home. Now, I had a dream about you. Something bad is going to happen. He chuckled, shaking his head. You're just being dramatic again. It's just a dream, Emily. I'm fine. No, you don't understand. I'm serious. I insisted, grabbing his arm. Please just come home with me. I can't shake this feeling. Ethan rolled his eyes. You're just stressed out. It's normal after everything that happened. I can handle myself. Frustration bubbled within me. Ethan, please. I can't explain it, but I feel like time is running out. He shrugged me off, turning back to his friends. I'll be fine, Emily. Just chill. I felt a surge of desperation as I watched him walk away, laughing with his friends, completely oblivious to the danger I sensed. I couldn't just stand by. I had to stay close to protect him, even if he wouldn't admit he needed it. The evening air grew heavy, and dark clouds rolled in, casting shadows over the park. A storm was brewing, and I felt a sense of dread wash over me. When I saw Ethan and his friends making plans to go to a nearby lake, my heart raced with an instinctual fear. Couldn't let him go. Ethan, I shouted, running after them. You can't go to the lake. It's dangerous. He turned, exasperated. Emily, stop. It's just a lake. You're being ridiculous. But I could feel it, the urgency, the impending sense of doom that clung to me like a shroud. Please, just listen to me. But he waved me off, and with a sinking feeling in my stomach, I followed them anyway, knowing I couldn't allow anything to happen to him. My heart pounded as we approached the lake, the wind howling ominously around us. As they reached the water's edge, the situation quickly escalated. One of Ethan's friends jumped in with a splash, but then silence fell. The water stilled, and my heart raced as panic set in. He wasn't coming back up. Ethan, get out of the water! I screamed, my voice lost in the chaos. No one seemed to hear me. Ethan dove in, but I watched in horror as he struggled, his friend still submerged and now in danger too. Ethan, I yelled, feeling helpless as I clutched the metal around my neck, a strange power surging within me. "Come on," I urged myself, as if the metal could somehow assist me. I could feel the energy coursing through me, an instinct to act, to save them. But as I watched the scene unfold in front of me, the realization hit me hard. I awoke in a cold sweat, my heart pounding against my ribcage like a caged bird desperate to escape. The echo of my grandfather's voice still rang in my ears, calling my name in a way that felt both familiar and haunting. I could still see him vividly in my mind, standing in a field of bright, colorful flowers, the sun glinting off his silver hair. But then, just as quickly as the image appeared, it twisted into chaos, a swirling maelstrom of shadows and screams. I could feel the panic rising within me, the inexplicable fear that something terrible was about to happen. Flipping the covers off, I stumbled out of bed and made my way to the kitchen, hoping that the scent of coffee would somehow ground me. My mother, Sarah, sat at the table, her eyes lost in the distance, staring blankly at a stack of papers. The remnants of the life we used to have lingered in the air, the unspoken words hanging between us like a thick fog. "Mom," I said hesitantly, breaking the silence. "I had another dream about Grandpa." She looked up, her expression momentarily flickering with recognition before settling back into that familiar mask of grief. "Not now, Emily. I'm busy." Frustration bubbled up inside me. But it was different this time. He was warning me about something. "Sweetheart, it's just your mind processing everything. You need to focus on school," she replied, her voice strained. I could see the shadows under her eyes, the way she fought to keep the grief at bay, but her indifference felt like a wall between us. I sighed, feeling the weight of my disappointment settle on my shoulders. It was clear that she was still lost in her own world, a world that didn't include my dreams or fears. I grabbed my backpack and headed out the door, leaving behind the kitchen and its suffocating atmosphere. The day dragged on, each class blending into the next, my thoughts consumed by the dreams I couldn't escape. By the time the final bell rang, I felt exhausted but restless. I needed to talk to someone who might understand. That's when I found Jake at our usual spot, a small cafe tucked away from the chaos of school life. "Hey, Em," he greeted me with a grin, but I could see the concern in his eyes as he noticed my frazzled state. "What's going on?" I sank into a chair across from him, my fingers nervously fidgeting with the hem of my shirt. I had another dream about my grandfather. It was intense. Jake leaned back, crossing his arms. Intense how? It was like he was trying to tell me something. But then it turned dark, and I saw chaos and screaming. "I don't know what it means," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He studied me for a moment, his brow furrowing. "Em, maybe it's just your mind processing the loss. You've been through a lot. Or maybe it's something more," I retorted, a hint of frustration creeping into my tone. "What if it's a warning? What if something bad is going to happen? Look, I get it. Losing someone is tough, and it can mess with your head. But dreaming about it doesn't mean it's prophetic," he said, trying to sound comforting but only making me feel more isolated. I bit my lip, feeling the anger simmer beneath the surface. "You don't understand." He was holding the medal, the one that belonged to him. "I think it's connected to the dreams." "Medal? What are you talking about?" Jake asked, genuinely puzzled. "Never mind," I sighed, pushing my chair back and standing up. "I need to figure this out myself." The next day, I found myself in the library, surrounded by dusty books and the smell of old paper. I had to know more about my family's history, about the strange feeling that something was looming over us. After hours of searching, I stumbled upon an old tome that spoke of a curse, a family curse that had plagued generations. The words sent chills down my spine as I read about a medal that had belonged to my grandfather, said to hold power over fate itself. What if this is what's causing my dreams? I murmured to myself, flipping through the pages frantically. There, wedged between the chapters, was a photograph of the medal, a beautiful piece, intricately designed with symbols I couldn't decipher. My heart raced when I realized that it wasn't in my grandfather's belongings anymore. I had to find it. Determined, I returned to my grandfather's house, the old creaking floorboards greeting me as I stepped inside. The air felt thick with memories, and I could almost hear his laughter echoing through the hallways. I made my way to the attic, where I knew boxes of old family items were stored. Dust danced in the rays of light filtering through the small window, creating an eerie atmosphere. As I rummaged through the boxes, my heart raced with anticipation. It was then that I found a small, weathered box tucked away in a corner. My fingers trembled as I opened it, revealing not just the metal, but also letters and notes from my grandfather. My breath caught in my throat as I unfolded the first letter. "Dear Emily," it began. "If you are reading this, it means that the cycle of tragedies has caught up with you, as it did with me. The medal is not just a family heirloom. It holds the key to our past and future. But with it comes a choice that will determine the fate of those you love." My heart sank as I read the words, the weight of their meaning crashing over me. "A choice?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "What kind of choice?" Just then, Jake climbed up the stairs, his face illuminated with curiosity. "What did you find?" he asked, peering over my shoulder. I held the letter up, my voice shaky. "It's about the curse. And the medal, it's not just a piece of jewelry. It's connected to everything. My dreams, the tragedies." Jake's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "What does it say?" "There's something about a cycle of tragedies and a choice that needs to be made. I think it's referring to what I saw in my dreams," I said, feeling a knot form in my stomach. He looked at me, his expression serious. "Maybe we should take this seriously. What if the medal does have some kind of power?" I nodded, my mind racing. "I need to wear it. Maybe it will help me understand or even—" "Are you sure that's a good idea?" he interrupted, the skepticism creeping back into his voice. Before I could respond, I felt an overwhelming urge to put it on. It felt like the weight of the world rested on my shoulders, and the metal seemed to beckon me. I clasped it around my neck, the cool metal resting against my skin. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me. The moment I closed my eyes, I was thrust into another dream, this one more vivid and terrifying than the last. I saw Ethan, my younger brother, standing on the edge of a dock, laughing with his friends, completely unaware of the danger lurking beneath the surface. My heart raced as I screamed his name, but he couldn't hear me. "Ethan, get away from the edge," I shouted, but my voice was drowned out by the sound of rushing water. Panic clawed at my insides as I watched him lean over, his laughter echoing in the distance. Suddenly, one of his friends leaped into the water, and I felt a sinking feeling in my chest. "No!" I screamed, but it was too late. The water splashed violently, and I could see Ethan's face twist in confusion before he dove in to save his friend. I woke up in a cold sweat, gasping for breath. The vision was so real, so visceral. I had to warn him. I scrambled out of bed and rushed to find Ethan, my heart pounding with urgency. When I finally found him at the basketball court, I was out of breath. "Ethan," I called out, running towards him. He looked up, a smile on his face, but it quickly faded when he saw my expression. "Emily, what's wrong? You need to come home. Please, just trust me," I pleaded, my voice shaking. He laughed, shaking his head. "What? Are you serious?" "I'm fine, Em. It's just a game." "No, Ethan. I mean it. You don't understand. Something bad is going to happen," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. He rolled his eyes, turning back to his friends. "You're just being dramatic. It's probably just a phase you're going through. Come on, let's play." I felt a wave of frustration and fear crash over me. Couldn't let him out of my sight. "I'll stay with you then," I declared, crossing my arms defiantly. "Whatever," he muttered, but I could see the concern starting to flicker in his eyes. The skies darkened as a storm rolled in, the thunder rumbling ominously overhead. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach as I watched Ethan and his friends decide to head to the nearby lake, a place that had always felt off limits. Wait, I shouted, following them against my better judgment, the wind whipping my hair around my face. You can't go there. It's dangerous. Chill out, Emily. We're just having fun. The weight of guilt was suffocating. Each day felt heavier than the last, as if the very air I breathed was thick with remorse. I couldn't shake off the images that haunted my mind, visions of Ethan, of the lake, and the desperate struggle beneath the water. I had tried to convince myself that I was just a kid dealing with the loss of my grandfather and the chaos that had invaded our family. But I knew better. The dreams had become more vivid, more urgent, and now they were not just about me. They were about my mother. I stood in my room, staring at the walls that had once felt like a safe haven. Now they felt like a cage. My heart raced as I remembered the last vision my mother, Sarah. Her face twisted in fear, trapped in some unseen danger. Couldn't breathe. The room spun, and I had to grip the edge of my desk to steady myself. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, trying to push the image away, but it clung to me like a shadow. Emily? Jake's voice cut through the fog in my mind. He had been my anchor through the storm, but even he was starting to look at me differently, as if he was afraid of what I might do next. I opened my eyes and found him leaning against the doorframe, concern etched on his face. "Hey!" I managed to reply, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, stepping into my room, his eyes scanning the cluttered space, searching for some sign of hope or normalcy. "I just had another vision," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He frowned, crossing his arms. "What was it this time? More about Ethan?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "It's Mom. She's in trouble, Jake. I can feel it. I need to do something." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I had come to recognize as his way of processing my words. "Emily, you can't keep doing this to yourself. You know how your mind works after everything. It's not just my mind." I interrupted, my frustration bubbling over. "These visions, they're real. I can't just ignore them because they make you uncomfortable. I need to figure out what's going on." Jake sighed, rubbing the back of his neck as he considered my words. "I just want you to be careful. You've already been through so much. What if this is just your grief talking? Then what if it's not?" I shot back, my heart racing. I could feel the urgency thrumming through me, pushing me to act. What if I don't do anything and something happens to her? I can't take that risk. Not again. He looked away, his expression clouded. "Okay, so what's the plan then? You can't just run out without knowing what you're getting into." I hesitated, the fear of the unknown gnawing at me. "I need to find out more about the curse. The more I learn, the better chance I have to protect her. There has to be a way to stop it." "Then let's find out together," Jake said, finally meeting my gaze. I could see the determination in his eyes, and for a moment, it eased the tightness in my chest. "But we need to be smart about this. No more reckless decisions. Promise." "Promise," I replied, though I wasn't sure how much of my promise would hold if I started seeing my mother in danger again. We spent the next few days in a haze of research. The library became our refuge, a vast world of knowledge where I could lose myself in the pages of forgotten histories and family secrets. I pored over every book I could find on curses, folklore, and my family's past, hoping to uncover something that would help me make sense of the chaos that had engulfed my life. One afternoon, as I flipped through the brittle pages of an old tome, I stumbled across a reference to a ritual that could potentially break the cycle of tragedies. A flicker of hope ignited within me. "Jake, look at this," I called, waving the book in his direction. He hurried over, his brow furrowing as he read the passage. "This talks about using a special object, like the medallion, to perform a ritual during a specific lunar phase. But it doesn't say how to do it or what the consequences are. Maybe that's because it's too dangerous," I muttered, my heart racing. "But we have to try. If there's even a chance that I can save Mom, I have to." Jake hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "What if it makes things worse? We could end up putting her in even more danger." I won't let that happen. I can't just sit back and wait for something to go wrong. I insisted, my voice trembling with urgency. I need to do this, Jake. That night, I barely slept. The dreams returned, more vivid than ever. I saw my mother in the kitchen, her expression distant and lost. The shadows around her seemed to pulse, dark tendrils creeping closer, threatening to engulf her. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The vision felt so real, and I had to do something now. The next morning, I decided to confront my mother. I found her sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand, staring blankly ahead. "Mom," I said softly, taking a seat across from her. She blinked, as if coming out of a trance. "What is it, Emily? I need to talk to you about something important." I began, my heart racing. "I've been having visions, and I think you're in danger." She looked at me, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "Emily, please, not this again. You're just going through a tough time. You need to focus on healing, not on whatever this is." "But Mom, I know what I saw. I can't just ignore it. I need your help to understand what's going on." I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. She shook her head, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I wish I could help you, but I can't. I've lost your father, and I can't lose you too. Please just let this go." I felt a pang in my chest, the pain of her denial cutting deeper than any knife. "You don't understand. This is bigger than us. I found out about the curse, about the medallion. We need to confront this together." Her face paled, and I could see the walls she had built around her heart begin to crack. "Emily, you don't know what you're talking about. That's just a story, an old wives' tale meant to scare children. But it's real. I can feel it," I shouted, frustration boiling over. "You're in danger. I can't let you just brush this off like it doesn't matter." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Enough. I won't have you dragging me into your fantasies. You need to face reality." "Reality? Is that what you call this?" I shot back, my voice trembling with emotion. "You're shutting me out, Mom. You're shutting out the truth." She turned away, her shoulders shaking as she fought to control her emotions. "I can't deal with this right now, Emily. I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt as though the ground had fallen out from beneath me. The realization that I was alone in this battle sunk in. I had to take action, to confront whatever darkness loomed over us without her support. In the following days, the visions intensified. I could see flashes of my mother in various scenarios, each one more terrifying than the last. I felt trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. My only solace came from Jake, who had become my confidant and partner in this harrowing journey. "Emily, you need to take care of yourself," he urged one day as we sat on the steps outside my house, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and pink. "You're putting so much pressure on yourself, and it's not healthy. I can't just sit back and watch everything fall apart," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "I have to do something." Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get that, but you also have to think about what this is doing to you. You can't save everyone, Emily. You need to save yourself first." I looked away, tears stinging my eyes. "But what if I can save her? What if I'm the only one who can?" He paused, his expression softening. "Then we'll figure it out together. Just promise me you won't take unnecessary risks. We'll find a way to help your mom without putting yourself in danger." I nodded, but deep down, I felt the weight of the burden I carried. The visions loomed over me like a dark cloud, and I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. I had to find the medallion, the key to breaking the curse, and I had to do it soon. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the shadows danced across the walls, taunting me. I closed my eyes, willing sleep to come, but the visions surged forth again, clearer than ever. I saw my mother, this time in a darkened room, trembling as a figure loomed over her. My heart raced as I reached out. The air in my room felt thick with tension as I sat cross-legged on the floor. The ancient pages of my grandfather's journal spread out before me. The faint light from the window illuminated the words that seemed to pulse with an energy of their own. The clock on the wall ticked ominously, each second echoing the dread that had settled in my chest. I had made a decision, and now I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. I had to perform the ritual. I knew it was the only way to break the cycle of tragedies that haunted my family. My dreams had become nightmares, each one more vivid than the last, and the latest had been a horrifying vision of my mother, Sarah, in dire danger. I could not ignore the signs any longer. The day had started with an argument. I had tried to explain my plans to my mother, hoping to convince her to help me, but her grief had turned her into a wall of resistance. I could still hear her voice ringing in my ears. "Emily, this is nonsense," she had snapped, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "You're just a child, lost in your fantasies. You need to stop this nonsense and focus on your healing." "But Mom, you don't understand," I had pleaded, my heart racing. "This isn't just a phase. I've seen things, terrible things. If I don't do something, we could all be in danger." She had shaken her head, her expression a mix of disbelief and pain. "You're just trying to cope with your grandfather's death. Please, just let it go." The conversation had spiraled into a fight, one that left us both feeling empty and more estranged than ever. I felt like I was shouting into a void, desperately trying to reach her, but she was too far gone in her grief. And now, with the knowledge of the curse weighing heavily on my shoulders, I felt utterly alone. I glanced at the clock again. Time was slipping away. I couldn't wait for her to understand. I had to act. Just then, my phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was Jake, my best friend, checking in on me after our last conversation about the dreams. I sighed, torn between wanting to confide in him and knowing how skeptical he could be. "Hey, Emily, you okay?" came his text. I took a deep breath, fingers hovering over the screen. "Not really. I think I'm going to try that ritual tonight." His response was immediate. "What? Are you serious? I thought we agreed that this was just your mind processing things." "Jake, I can't explain it. I feel like I have to do this. I've seen things in my dreams, things that are coming true." I typed back, my heart pounding. He replied after a moment, "Emily, please think this through. You can't just jump into something like this. What if it makes things worse?" I stared at the screen, frustration bubbling up inside me. What if it doesn't? What if it's the only thing that can save my family? "Just be careful, okay? I'm here if you need me," he finally texted back, and I could sense his worry through the screen. The thought of Jake being by my side brought me a small measure of comfort, but I knew this was a path I had to walk alone. I tucked my phone away and focused on the journal again. The words seemed to shimmer with urgency, as if they were calling out to me. As evening fell, I gathered the items I would need for the ritual. Candles, a piece of my grandfather's favorite fabric, and of course, the metal I had found in the attic. The metal felt warm against my skin, as if it recognized the gravity of what I was about to do. I set everything up in a small clearing in the woods behind my house, a place where I could feel the energy of the earth beneath me. The trees loomed overhead, their branches swaying softly in the evening breeze. I felt a mix of fear and determination as I arranged the candles in a circle. The shadows danced around me, and I could almost hear whispers in the wind. Taking a deep breath, I lit the candles one by one, focusing on each flickering flame. It was time to confront the darkness that had plagued my family for generations. Just as I was about to begin, I heard a rustling behind me. I turned to see Jake stepping into the clearing, his face etched with concern. "What are you doing here?" I asked, a mixture of relief and annoyance flooding through me. "I couldn't let you do this alone," he said, his voice steady but laced with worry. "I know you think you need to do this, but I'm scared for you." I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. "You don't have to be here, Jake. This is something I have to do. You don't understand how serious this is." "Then tell me," he implored, stepping closer. "What exactly do you think this ritual will do?" I hesitated, searching for the right words. "I think it can break the curse," The journal talks about a cycle of tragedies that's been haunting my family. I've seen it in my dreams, and if I don't act, it might claim my mom next. Jake's expression softened, and for a moment, I saw the flicker of understanding in his eyes. "And you really believe this will work?" "I have to believe it," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is the only thing I can do. I can't just sit back and wait for something terrible to happen." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly torn. "Okay then, I'm with you. Just promise me you'll be careful." I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "Let's do this together." We stood in the circle of candles, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows on our faces. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts as I began to recite the words from my grandfather's journal. With each word, I felt a connection to the past, a bridge forming between me and the generations that had come before. "By the spirits of the earth and sky, I call upon you to hear my plea," I intoned, my voice steady despite the rising tension in the air. "To break the bonds of the curse that has plagued my family for too long." As I spoke, I could feel an energy gathering around us, a force that seemed to respond to my call. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves above us, and I glanced at Jake, who looked both awed and terrified. "Keep going," he urged, his voice barely above a whisper. I continued, pouring my heart into the words, invoking the spirit of my grandfather and the strength of my ancestors. The atmosphere grew heavier, the air crackling with power. I could feel the presence of something beyond our world, watching, waiting. But just as I reached the climax of the ritual, a chill swept through the clearing. I stumbled over my words, my heart racing as shadows twisted around us, darkening the light of the candles. "Emily, what's happening?" Jake shouted, fear creeping into his voice. "I don't know," I cried, trying to regain my focus. "I have to finish." As I struggled to recite the final lines, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my vision. A flash of my mother's face, twisted in fear. Panic surged through me, and I faltered, the words catching in my throat. "Emily!" Jake grabbed my arm, his grip firm and grounding. "You need to stop. This isn't what you wanted." "No, I can't stop now," I shouted, desperation clawing at me. "I have to save her." But the energy around us began to spiral out of control. The shadows seemed to thicken, coiling like serpents around my legs, pulling me down. I felt a sudden surge of fear wash over me, and doubt crept into my mind. "Emily, please." Jake's voice broke through the chaos, but it felt distant, muffled by the overwhelming darkness. "You're losing control." And in that moment, I realized that I was indeed teetering on the edge of something dangerous. I had wanted to break the cycle, to save my family. But at what cost? "Jake, I started. But before I could finish, the shadows enveloped me completely, plunging me into a cold abyss. I could see nothing but darkness, and I felt as if I were being pulled apart, the weight of the past crashing down on me. In a last-ditch effort, I clutched the metal against my heart, hoping for some guidance, some way to reverse the chaos I had unleashed. But the darkness only deepened, and I was left with a sinking feeling of despair. I didn't know if I could save my mother, if I could save anyone. All I felt was the crushing realization that I might have unleashed something even worse than the curse itself. The day of the ritual arrived, and the air was thick with a mixture of anticipation and dread. I had spent the entire night replaying every moment that had led me to this point. The dreams, the visions, each one more terrifying than the last. I could still hear the echoes of my grandfather's voice, urging me to break the cycle of tragedies that had plagued our family for generations. It was as if he was standing right there beside me, pushing me forward. Jake and I met at the secluded clearing just beyond the edge of the woods, a place I had chosen for its solitude. The towering trees seemed to wrap around us like a protective barrier, shielding us from the outside world. I could hear the faint rustle of leaves in the wind, but it felt almost like a whispering chorus, urging me onward. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced around us. "Are you sure about this, Emily?" Jake asked, his brow furrowing with concern. He had always been the voice of reason, the skeptic who grounded me when things got too intense. But today I could sense his unease. This is a lot. I have to do this, Jake, I replied, my voice steady but laced with a tremor of fear. I can't just stand by and let the cycle continue. What if my dreams are telling me something? What if they're a warning? He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, eyes scanning the clearing as if searching for answers. But what if it's just your mind processing everything? You've been through so much lately, your dad, and the drowning. Could all just be trauma? I took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. I thought that too, but after finding the medal and the letter from my grandfather, it feels different. Feels real. He mentioned a choice, and I can't ignore it. Jake nodded slowly, his expression softening. Okay, I'm with you. Just promise me that if things start to get out of hand, we stop. We can figure it out together. I smiled at him, grateful for his support, even if I could sense the tension in his voice. I promise, but I have to try. We spread a worn blanket on the ground and arranged the items we'd brought. The medal, a few candles, and the pages from my grandfather's diary that contained the words we needed to recite. Each item felt heavy with significance, as if the weight of our family history pressed down on us. I picked up the medal, its metal cool against my palm, and felt a surge of determination. Are you ready? I asked Jake, who was lighting the candles one by one. Each flickering flame cast eerie shadows that danced in the underbrush. As ready as I'll ever be, he replied, trying to inject some lightness into the moment, but I could see the worry etched across his face. I took my place beside him, our shoulders almost touching, and we began to recite the words from the diary. The incantation rolled off my tongue, and with each syllable, I could feel the air change around us. The wind picked up, swirling leaves and dirt into a miniature cyclone that danced between us. It felt like the forest was responding, as if nature itself was aware of the energies we were invoking. Emily, look, Jake exclaimed, his voice rising above the howling wind. I turned toward him, and my heart raced as I saw a shimmer in the air, a distortion that felt both inviting and menacing. It was as if a doorway to another realm was opening, and I could feel my grandfather's presence enveloping us. Stay focused, I shouted over the noise, trying to keep my mind anchored to the words. We have to finish. The energy swirled around us, and I closed my eyes, allowing the incantation to flow through me. It felt powerful, intoxicating, and yet I could sense an undercurrent of something darker lurking just beneath the surface. Visions flickered behind my closed eyelids. Images of my family, moments of joy intermingled with sorrow, the weight of loss pressing down on me. Emily, Jake yelled, breaking my concentration. I opened my eyes to find him staring at something behind me, his expression one of terror. What's happening? I spun around, and my breath caught in my throat. The shadows had deepened, swirling around us like a storm, and I could see figures emerging from the darkness. They were vague at first, but then they sharpened. My family, faces twisted in anguish, their mouths moving but no sound escaping. I reached out, desperate to grasp them, but they flickered away like candlelight in a breeze. Emily, we need to stop, Jake shouted, panic clear in his voice. This is wrong. No, we can't. I felt the words slip from my lips, almost as if they weren't my own. We have to keep going. I can't let this happen again. The wind howled, and the ground beneath us trembled. I felt a rush of energy surge through me, almost overwhelming in its intensity. It was as if the very fabric of reality was tearing apart, and at that moment, I understood the weight of what I was attempting to do. I was standing on the precipice of something vast and unknown. Emily, look out! Jake's voice broke through the chaos, pulling me back into the moment. I turned just in time to see a shadowy figure lunging toward me, its face a grotesque mask of sorrow and rage. I stumbled back, fear gripping my heart. Jake! I cried out, my voice barely above a whisper. What is happening? He reached for me, his hand brushing against mine. We need to end this, Emily. It's too dangerous. His eyes were wide with fear, and I could see the struggle within him, torn between wanting to help me and the instinct to flee. But deep down, I felt a pull, a connection to the ritual that was stronger than my fear. "I can't stop now," I insisted, my voice shaking but resolute. "I have to confront it. I have to break the cycle." As I spoke, the shadows around us thickened, the air crackling with energy. They writhed and twisted, forming shapes that seemed to reach out for me, beckoning me closer. It was a cruel temptation, and I felt their voices whispering in my mind, a cacophony of sorrow and despair. "Emily, you're losing yourself," Jake shouted, desperation etched on his face. "Please, let's go." But I couldn't let go. Not now. I had come too far, and the stakes were too high. "I'm not afraid," I declared, my voice rising above the chaos. "I won't let you take my family." The shadows recoiled as if my words had struck them. I felt a surge of strength flow through me, igniting a fire in my spirit. I focused on the metal around my neck, its cold metal warm against my skin, and I called upon the energy that surged within me. "Show me," I screamed, my voice breaking through the tumult. "Show me the truth." In that moment, the world around us shifted. The shadows parted, revealing a vision of my mother, Sarah. She stood in a darkened room, her face pale and drawn, as if she was trapped in a nightmare of her own. My heart raced, and I felt an overwhelming urge to reach out to her, to pull her from the darkness. "Mom!" I cried, but the vision flickered, and I felt a tug on my heart. "Emily!" Jake's voice broke through the turmoil again, filled with urgency. "We need to stop. This isn't what we wanted." But I couldn't stop. I had to save her, to break the cycle. "I can't let this happen to her," I shouted back, my voice a mixture of determination and despair. "I won't let her suffer like this." The energy around us surged again, and I could feel the air crackling with power. It was intoxicating, and I could sense the shadows retreating. But at what cost? The vision of my mother blurred, and I grasped the metal tighter, willing it to guide me, to show me the way. "Stay with me, Emily," Jake pleaded, grabbing my arm, grounding me. "We can do this together." I looked at him, his eyes filled with fear but also unwavering support. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of doubt, a nagging thought that perhaps I was in over my head. But then I remembered the dreams, the warnings, and the weight of my family's legacy pressing down on me. "I need you, Jake," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the chaos. "I can't do this alone." He nodded, determination settling on his features. "Then let's do it together. On three." I took a deep breath, my heart racing. 1, 2, 3. We recited the incantation together, our voices rising in unison, drowning out the shadows that threatened to engulf us. The air vibrated with energy, and I could feel the ground beneath us tremble. The shadows recoiled, twisting and warping as if they were caught in a storm. "Keep going," I urged, feeling the power swell around us. "We're breaking through." As we spoke the final words, a blinding light erupted from the metal, illuminating the clearing and pushing back the darkness. I felt a surge of hope, a belief that we were finally making progress. But then, out of the corner, the air around me was thick with tension, a palpable energy that seemed to hum and vibrate as Jake and I stood in the clearing. I could feel the weight of the ritual pressing down on my shoulders, the gravity of what we were attempting to do. My heart raced as I glanced at Jake, whose brow was furrowed with concern. "Are you sure about this, Emily?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The wind rustled through the trees, a chilling reminder of the storm that had been brewing in the distance. I could see the clouds gathering, dark and foreboding, as if they were mirroring my own swirling emotions. "I have to be," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "If there's even a chance that this ritual can break the curse, I have to try." My hands trembled as I clutched the piece of paper with the incantation. It felt like a lifeline, a promise of hope in the midst of despair. He stepped closer, the concern etched on his face deepening. "But what if something goes wrong?" What if we unleash something we can't control? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. We can't think like that. I've seen too much already. My dreams, they've shown me how real the danger is. I can't just stand by and do nothing. My voice wavered slightly, but I pressed on. It's my family, Jake. It's my mom. I can't let anything happen to her. Jake nodded slowly, his eyes searching mine for any hint of doubt. Okay, just promise me that if it gets too dangerous, we'll stop. We'll find another way. Promise, I said, though I wasn't sure I could keep it. I felt the weight of the metal on my neck, the cool metal pressing against my skin as a reminder of my grandfather's legacy and the burden I now carried. The wind picked up, swirling around us like a living entity, and I could feel a strange pull, urging me to begin. Let's do this, I said, my voice steadying as I stepped into the center of the clearing. Jake followed, and we positioned ourselves as instructed in the notes I had painstakingly deciphered. Together, we raised our arms, and I began to recite the words from the ancient text. "O spirits of the past, hear my plea. Break this curse that binds my family. Release us from the cycle of tragedy, and let us find peace." My voice echoed in the stillness, the words resonating with a power I had never felt before. As I spoke, I noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The wind howled, almost in response, and I felt a tingling sensation surge through my body. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The trees around us swayed, their branches creaking ominously, and I could feel the energy building, like a storm poised to break. "Emily, something's happening," Jake shouted over the roaring wind, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. I kept reciting the incantation, focused on the words, the rhythm. "Grant us the strength to overcome, to break free from the chains of sorrow. Let the light of love prevail." Each phrase felt like a plea, a desperate cry for help. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted in front of us, and I stumbled back, shielding my eyes. "Jake!" I called out, panic rising in my chest. The light was overwhelming, a dazzling beacon that illuminated the clearing, casting long shadows that danced around us. "Emily, hold on!" Jake shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the chaos. I could feel the ground beneath me tremble, the very earth shaking as if it were alive. My heart pounded in my chest, a relentless drumbeat of fear and determination. As the light began to dim, I caught glimpses of figures swirling within, faint silhouettes that seemed to reach out to me. I gasped, recognizing the faces of my family. My mother, my grandfather, even Ethan. Their expressions were a mixture of fear and longing, and I felt a surge of emotion wash over me. "Emily," I heard my mother's voice, distant yet urgent. "Don't do this. You don't know what you're unleashing." "Mom," I cried, reaching out for her, but the light flickered, and she was gone. "No, come back." The energy around me intensified, and I felt a pull, as if the very fabric of reality was stretching and warping. Shadows began to swirl around us, dark tendrils creeping in from the edges of the clearing. My heart raced as I realized that the ritual was spiraling out of control. "Jake, we have to stop," I shouted, panic clawing at my insides. "I can't. The words, they won't let me," he yelled back, his voice strained as he fought against the encroaching darkness. I could feel the shadows pressing closer, wrapping around my legs like icy fingers, and I knew we were running out of time. The visions of my family flashed before me again, their faces twisted in anguish. "I can't lose them," I shouted, desperation fueling my voice. "Emily, focus. You have to control it." Jake's voice cut through the chaos, a lifeline in the storm. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to concentrate on the love I felt for my family. "I can do this," I whispered, more to myself than to him. I closed my eyes, envisioning the light that had surrounded us, pushing back against the darkness. "I will protect them. I will break this curse." With renewed determination, I began to adjust the incantation, weaving in my own words. "Spirits of light, guide us. We seek healing, we seek love. Let the past rest in peace, and bring us the strength to move forward. The shadows hesitated, swirling uncertainly as if they were unsure of their place. I could feel the energy shifting again, the pull becoming less oppressive. "That's it, Emily. Keep going," Jake encouraged, his voice steadier now. I poured every ounce of my will into the words, my heart racing as I felt the shadows begin to recede. The light flickered back to life, brighter than before, illuminating the clearing with a warm glow. "Let love prevail. Break this cycle," I cried, my voice rising above the wind. The shadows writhed, fighting against the light, but I refused to back down. I could feel the connection to my family growing stronger, their love wrapping around me like a protective shield. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos reached a crescendo. The shadows let out an anguished wail, and I felt a surge of energy course through me, as if I were channeling all the love and pain of my family into one final push. "No, be free," I shouted, and with that, the darkness shattered, exploding into a million tiny shards of light that scattered into the air. I staggered back, breathless, as the clearing fell silent. The wind died down, leaving only the sound of my ragged breaths. Jake stood beside me, his eyes wide with disbelief. Did it work?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. I glanced around the clearing, half expecting the darkness to return. But instead, there was only peace. Suddenly, a vision flashed before my eyes. My mother standing in the living room, a look of serenity on her face. The image was fleeting, but it filled me with a sense of hope. "I think it did," I murmured, a smile breaking through my fear. But just as quickly as the hope surged, a wave of dread washed over me. I remembered the warnings, the cycle of tragedies, and the darkness that still lurked in the corners of my mind. "Emily, we should get back," Jake said, breaking me from my thoughts. "We need to make sure everyone is okay." "Yeah," I replied, though uncertainty gnawed at my insides. As we turned to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for its moment to strike. As we walked back through the woods, I glanced down at the metal hanging around my neck. It felt warm against my skin, but I couldn't ignore the weight of what had just transpired. The battle wasn't over, and I knew deep down that my fight to protect my family was only just beginning. The wind howled around me, a mournful sound that echoed the turmoil within my heart. I stood in the clearing, the moon casting an eerie glow on everything around me. Jake was beside me, his face a mask of panic and disbelief. I could see the desperation in his eyes, the way he clutched my arm as if he could somehow anchor me to this world, to the life I'd always known. "Emily, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "We can find another way. We don't have to do this. We can figure it out together." But I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders, the burden of the curse that had haunted my family for generations. The visions had escalated, morphing from vague nightmares into terrifying glimpses of the future, each more vivid and distressing than the last. My mother, Sarah, had been at the center of them, her face pale and stricken with fear. I couldn't bear the thought of losing her, of seeing her fall victim to the same cycle of tragedies that had claimed so many of my family members before me. "I have to do this," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "It's the only way to save her, to break the curse." I can feel it, Jake. It's like a pull, a call from my grandfather. "The ritual is our only hope." He shook his head, frustration etched across his features. "But what if it doesn't work? What if you end up—" "Don't say it," I cut him off, fear creeping in at the edges of my resolve. "We're out of options. I can't stand by and watch my family suffer any longer. I can't lose her." The words hung between us, heavy with the weight of finality. I could see the conflict in Jake's eyes, the battle between wanting to protect me and understanding the depth of my pain. He opened his mouth, hesitated, then closed it again. There was nothing left to say. We both knew that. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. The ancient words from my grandfather's notes echoed in my mind, a rhythmic chant that seemed to resonate with the very air around me. As I stood there, I could feel the energy of the night shifting, swirling around us like a living entity. The trees swayed as if whispering secrets to one another, and the shadows danced in the moonlight. "Emily?" Jake's voice softened, his hand gently squeezing mine. "You don't have to do this alone. We can figure this out together. Please, just let me help you." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the fear etched in the lines of his face, the way his eyes flicked nervously towards the darkened woods. I wished more than anything that I could take his hand and walk away from this, that we could return to the simplicity of our lives before the dreams had begun to haunt me. But I couldn't. I had seen too much. I knew too well the price of inaction. "I appreciate it, Jake. I really do," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "But this is something I have to do. For my family. For you. For everyone who has suffered because of this curse." The wind picked up again, howling through the trees as if it were lamenting my decision. I steeled myself, drawing the metal around my neck tighter against my skin. The cold metal felt like a lifeline, a connection to my grandfather and the generations before him. I could almost feel their presence surrounding me, urging me forward. "Just promise me you won't do anything reckless," Jake said, his eyes searching mine for any sign of doubt. "I can't lose you, Emily. Not like this." I squeezed his hand in response, knowing this would be the last moment we shared before everything changed. "I promise," I said, but even as I spoke the words, doubts flickered in my mind like shadows at the edge of my vision. We moved to the center of the clearing, the ancient symbols carved into the ground barely visible beneath the fallen leaves. I knelt down, placing the metal in the center of the markings, my heart racing as I recalled the instructions from the notes. The words came back to me, a melody of syllables that felt both foreign and familiar. "Are you ready?" Jake's voice was barely above a whisper, his breath hitching in the cold air. I nodded, feeling the weight of his gaze on me. "Let's do this." As we began to chant, the wind howled around us, growing stronger, whipping at our clothes and pulling at our hair. The energy in the air crackled, a palpable force that sent shivers down my spine. I felt the connection to my past, the spirits of my ancestors, my grandfather's guiding presence, all urging me to continue. But as the words left my lips, a darkness began to creep in at the edges of my vision. The shadows deepened, twisting and writhing, and I felt a chill settle in my bones. I stumbled slightly, but Jake caught me, his grip firm and steady. "Emily!" he shouted, panic rising in his voice. "What's happening?" "I don't know," I gasped, the words choking in my throat. I felt the energy shifting, a force pushing against me, trying to pull me away from the ritual. "Keep going." But the darkness was relentless, a suffocating weight that pulled at my mind and heart. I could see visions flashing before my eyes. My mother, screaming, trapped in a web of shadows. I felt the desperation wash over me, threatening to drown me. "Mom!" I cried, the name tearing from my throat. "I have to save her." "Emily, focus," Jake urged, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't let it take you." But it was too late. The energy surged around me, wrapping me in a cocoon of darkness that seemed to pulse with malicious intent. I felt myself slipping, the world fading away as I was drawn deeper into the void. In that moment of despair, a thought struck me like lightning. To save her, I had to face the darkest part of myself. I had to make the ultimate sacrifice. "No!" I screamed, fighting against the pull. "I won't let it take me." "Emily!" Jake shouted, his voice echoing in the abyss. "Don't give in." I felt the warmth of his presence, anchoring me just enough to grasp onto a shred of hope. "I can do this," I gasped, forcing the words out despite the weight pressing down on me. "I'll break the cycle." With every ounce of strength I had left, I focused on the light that flickered in my heart, the love I had for my family, for Jake, for everything I held dear. I channeled that energy into the metal, feeling it pulse against my skin as I pushed back against the darkness. "Take me," I screamed, my voice rising above the chaos. "I'll sacrifice myself. Just let my family go." The darkness roared around me, a furious tempest that clashed against my resolve. I felt it release its grip on my mind, but at a terrible cost. The shadows surged forward, enveloping me in a blanket of cold despair. "Emily, no!" Jake cried, reaching for me, but I was already lost in the depths of the void. I could feel the energy of the ritual surging, a final, desperate attempt to break free from the cycle of tragedy. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the darkness. "I love you, Jake," I whispered, and then I was gone, swallowed by the abyss. The world around me exploded in a blinding flash of light, a cacophony of sound that echoed through the night. I felt weightless, suspended between worlds, as the energy rippled around me, pulling me in every direction. And then, just as suddenly, everything fell silent. I opened my eyes, and the clearing was empty. The wind had died down, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves in its wake. The ground where the metal had been was bare, the symbols fading into the earth. "Emily?" Jake's voice echoed in the stillness, a haunting whisper that sent chills down my spine. "Where are you?" But I couldn't respond. I felt a profound emptiness where my heart used to be, a gaping void that swallowed all my fears and hopes. I was gone, a mere echo of what used to be. Jake stood alone in the clearing, his expression a mixture of confusion and despair. I could see him looking around, searching for me, for any sign that I was still there. But the truth settled heavily in the air. There was no coming back from this. He knelt down, brushing his fingers over the ground where I had once stood. His eyes fell on the metal, glinting in the moonlight, and he picked it up, cradling it in his palm. The realization hit him like a freight train, and he fell to his knees, the weight of loss crashing over him. "No, no, no," he murmured, tears streaming down his face. "Emily, please come back. Don't leave me like this." But I was gone, a sacrifice made to break the chains of the curse that had haunted my family for generations. I had chosen to face the darkness, to give everything for the chance of saving my family. As the night deepened, Jake remained there, clutching the metal, the realization settling in his heart like a cold stone. The curse had not been broken. It had only transformed. And now,